Hello, Merry Meet. So today I want to discuss something that's been bugging me for some time, and that is how many within the pagan community treat the burning times. Now, this is a very tragic part of human history. It's become a symbolism of fanatism gone wild and prosecution, and I think that it should be treated with a lot more respect than it is. Now, here's my argument. And I'm not saying in any way that all pagans do this, because clearly not all pagans do this. But there are a tendency in quite a few books where basically the burning times are used as an excuse to hate Christians today. And I think that is completely wrong. First of all, if you're gonna look at prosecution of people practicing magic, that's been on and off through all of history. So yeah, we might as well then hate ourselves as pagans, because several of the pagan communities, like for example the old Roman, prosecuted witchcraft. Yes, they were officially sanctioned, if you want to call it that, magic that were allowed to be practiced by some people, but generally if somebody was found to be practicing witchcraft, they were executed. And in fact the Romans killed about as many as the Christians did during the burning times. And the Norse, they weren't that much better, because while it was considered a good thing when women were practicing magic, it was considered a very unmanly and cowardly act for a man to do so. So basically quite a few male practitioners were executed, and especially when Christianity came, but there were still pagan roots, basically the sorcerers went before the sorceresses, to say it like that. So yeah, there's a lot of prosecution against magic use in pagan history as well. This isn't unique to Christianity. And as such, I think we should rather treat it as a very tragic thing that happened, an example of what can happen when we let fear and prejudice run away with us, rather than as a reason to say, hey, Christians, they hurt us. Because I watched a video today on YouTube where one said that there's a lot of bitterness in the pagan community, and I completely agree with him. There's a lot of the idea that Christians hurt us, Christians are the enemy, and we have to somehow stand strong and fight against Christianity. And no! I mean, yes, sure, there are some Christians who have a problem with any other faith, including paganism. And I mean, when we see Sarah Palin get blessed against witchcraft and go out and rant against it and so on, but that doesn't mean Christianity as whole should be blamed for this. And we shouldn't look basically 400 years into the past and point and say, look how horrible Christianity is. So yeah. Now, one of the things that is often a problem with this is the idea of how many people were actually executed. Now, if the numbers presented in some of the pagan books I've read were to be correct, there wouldn't have been any more people left in Europe. I mean, some speak of billions, and when you speak of like 30 million and so on, but there weren't that many people back then, really, so yeah. there were a lot of people who were executed, and it's true that there were some cities, for example some here in Northern Europe, who were left completely without women when the fires died down. But the numbers weren't so severe as many pagans think. Now we don't know the exact number, because while there are records of some of the witch processes, there isn't about every one of them. So we don't know. I think the most commonly accepted among researchers is about 30,000, which is a huge number and it's a great tragedy, but it's not several million. Another thing, perhaps one of the most offensive things that I think is done in this case I'm talking about here, is that some pagans likes to call everybody who died during the burning times for basically martyrs for the pagan cause. How do I even begin to talk about that? Basically, these people, the people who were executed, 99% of them were Christians. If we're talking about the burning times in Europe and eventually to the newly founded Americas, they were Christians. Of course, there were a few people who were herb women or occultists in some way. I mean, for example, Jan D, who were the court astrologer of Elizabeth I, were this close to being arrested a few times for witchcraft. So yeah, there were a few, but most hadn't done anything. They were caught up in superstitions, hysteria, and sometimes just power politics. And in a way, what people are doing when they declare them for martyrs for the pagan cause is to level the same accusations against them in death, because they would be appalled at even the kind of witchcraft that we practice. I mean, this is exactly the same that is done when the Mormons, yeah, that's right, the Mormons, declare people for, basically baptize people into their faith after they have died. I mean, we all can find that offensive. Some such and such person definitely might not be Mormon, and then the Mormons declare them to be members of their faith after death. It's respectless, and it sort of offends the person's life and their faith, and they died. And you're doing exactly the same thing when you declare everybody who died during the burning times for martyrs for a pagan cause, because most were not witches. Basically, there's a lot of reasons for the witch crazes. First of all, people were living in very hard times, and it's very easy to want a scapegoat. I mean, take a look at something as simple as, I'm sure that sometimes things go wrong in your life and you just want somebody to blame. It's much easier to yell at your husband for having placed the cup wrong when it falls down and hit your toe than to accept that shit happens. And when it's more serious things like the cow that's the only way for your family to survive, so you know that at least some of your children will starve to death, know that it has died, and that gets sick and dies, you want to blame someone. And then in a society that's very superstitious, it's very easy to seek out some devil or some sort of witch or something like that to lay the blame on, dare to blame. And of course, the local authorities played into this, because They were then seen doing something. It's the same as not many years ago there was a robbery gone wrong, and there were two young men who were breaking in, and the police came, and basically one of them had Asperger's syndrome, the same syndrome that I have. And when the police said, "Drop your gun," he said, "Give it to him." And the other young man shot the cop. Now, as a result, the one who shot, he was too young, so he couldn't be executed. But the boy with Asperger's, he was just over the legal limit, so they did sentence him to death and executed him. This was in the United States. Even if experts on his condition said that he speaks very literally, so that if he would have wanted the other boy to shoot the cop, he would have said, "Shoot him. Give it to him, man. Give him the gun." And yeah, eventually, after his death, he was exonerated and declared innocent. And they were asked, why did you push so much to get this kid sentenced? And the police said, well, we needed it to look good. We needed to have somebody post the blame on, somebody to take the fall for this horrible thing that had happened. It was exactly the same thing during the burning times. Basically, the authorities needed somebody to take the blame for all the shit that was happening, and they needed to show that they were doing something. And look, see, we have hunted down and burned a witch. That was a way to show that they were doing something. And of course, a lot of the witch hunts didn't happen even with any sort of sanction from the public. It was the local populations who went into lynch mobs. So yeah, that's part of it, because people were living a hard life, they needed somebody to blame, and witches proved to be a simple target to place that blame on, both for the local population and for the authorities. A second thing is that eventually it became so that when a witch were seized, the authorities could take all her property. And when that happened, you saw a remarkable shift in the demographics for who were accused of witchcraft. Before, it was usually poor beggar women, sometimes men, and they were, because they stood aside of society, they didn't have anyone to speak for them and so on. But when there was something to gain from accusing someone witch, suddenly, lo and behold, people with power and influence got accused of being witches and dragged in. So there was also a monetary motivation then. So yeah, there were a lot. It's a complex social study why the witch hunts happen, and we can see many similarities actually to how Muslims are treated today. Of course, they are not hunted down and burned, but there are performed illegal surveillance on them. You have a lot of people in American prisons, including at Gitmo, who are innocent. I mean, the people that's been released from there who were just at the wrong place at the wrong time and happened to be Muslim. The rhetoric that's presented in the media, how Muslims do this and Muslims do that, Muslims come in here to take our job, Muslims do, yeah, basically. It's the same kind of rhetoric. It was the same kind of rhetoric also you found before the Second World War when it came to Jews. The same kind of ugliness have shown up through the years and just picked different kinds of targets. But I'm getting off track. My point is how pagans view the burning times, not so much a historical record of the burning times themselves. And yeah, I think it's very easy to point at the burning times and say see here, the Christians hurt us. This is what the Christians did. And I think that becomes very wrong, because it's not so much what the Christians did as it's what ignorance, prejudice, and people living under appalling situations did. Basically, like one of the books about the burning times that I really like, called Satan's Women. There's a quote there that says, "Give man the right to hate, and he'll hate. Give him the right to kill, and he'll kill." Basically, meaning, if we can find somebody to blame for everything that goes wrong in our lives, we will do that. If we can find somebody to hurt to make ourselves feel better, we'll do that. We can see that all over the world. So yeah. Now, of course, you might argue that the burning times isn't over. There's still places in Africa where people are prosecuted and executed for witchcraft. And very often it is Christians doing that, and witchcraft is illegal in, for example, Israel. And while you are not executed for it, you can get one hefty fine. And in several Muslim nations, like for example Saudi Arabia, witchcraft is punishable by death. And it's only a couple of years ago when a person was actually executed. The person was beheaded for witchcraft in Saudi Arabia. So it's not over. No, it's not over, but it doesn't really have that much to do with Christianity. It has to do with ignorance. It has to do with fanatism. Now, are there Christians who are ignorant fanatics who cannot stand people having other beliefs than them? Yes, of course, and I'm completely against that. I think that kind of things is both foolish and silly and dangerous. It's wrong in all kinds of ways to basically say that if you don't agree with me, you should die, you're evil, you're a wrong person, you're a bad person. What I ever do think is wrong is to use the historical fact of the burning times as a way to be bitter today, because in the West at least, the burning times have been over for several hundred years. And I think that the only way that the various religions are going to become more harmonious, the only way for there to be more peace in the world, is if people of various groups are willing to forget the past. Well, not forget it, more forgive the past and move on. And in addition, it didn't happen to you. I think that's the main thing that irks me. The burning times did not happen to you. It happened to mostly Christian people who lived in a very superstitious community. Only a small fraction of them were actually witches. Now, if you are the reincarnation of one of them or something that doesn't have past life memories, I guess you can say that happened to you. But unless that's the case, it didn't happen to you. You don't have anything to be bitter about. And I completely agree about the saying no more burning times. But that you could say about anything. No more killing in the name of ignorance, persecution, and basically no more judging people just for being of a certain faith, having certain abilities, being a certain race, being a certain gender. Basically, you might as well say no more prosecution. And I completely stand on the side of that. I support it 100%. But don't use the burning times as a tool to sort of say, oh, we poor pagans, we were hurt by Christians. Because basically it's too serious an event. A lot of people died, and it's disrespectful to use it in such a manner. We should honor those that died. and we should try to work towards greater respect and understanding among various religious groups and various people, because that's the way to lessen the chance that something horrible like that will happen again. Have a great day, and blessed be.